How's it going at school?
Good enough. Um, Looks like hockey team will be 8-0, and girls, yeah, they're both in top five, so I'm pretty jacked about it.
Everyone's healthy? No other outbreaks?
Not in our end. Other teams have, so they've canceled, but we're good.
Football's had a hard time, haven't they?
Yeah. Man, they canceled twice in Wisconsin, Northwestern, and then this week we got Nebraska, so hopefully that goes, and we'll see what comes out.
They'll play that one because they might win it.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that's not the way it works. So that's not the way it works.
PJ Fleck would never do that.
Harbaugh guaranteed that he wouldn't lose to Ohio State this year.
Yeah, right.
Go, huh?
I'm not going to say anything.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm going to watch the game just because I heard that.
It's canceled.
It's canceled. That's why he guaranteed
canceled?
it, man.
Yeah.
They canceled it?
No, Ohio State's
103 years.
Who's sick?
103.
Michigan.
Sure. I probably would be too. So.
They were 30-point underdogs.
Oh my.
That would not have been good.
Yeah, to say the least.
So all you guys joining us now, you can chat as much as you want, but the question and answer stuff, put it under the Q&A thing at the bottom. And we've been getting to pretty much everybody's questions on all these podcasts. Cal, do you have any time limits?
About 8:10. So I got an hour, 70 minutes.
Okay, we're good.
Yep.
Want to get started? Are we still? Is people are still coming in? The number keeps going up. Let's see.
Coach, it says you're hosting it. I didn't know you knew how to host it.
I know how to host it.
Well, I meant Tony. It says Tony's the host. So
Blake turned it over to him.
I know nothing.
I know. So you just know how to feed the cats.
That's all it takes, man.
Right?
I talked to a lacrosse coach today for an hour. I spoke at the Intercollegiate Lacrosse Coaches Association, and they're pretty ramped up about the Feed the Cats idea.
Yeah. Well, they should be.
All they know is running nonstop.
Yeah, it's nonstop. It's terrible.
It's just continuous.
Continuous 60% running.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can run at 60% all day.
Yep. And then they condition at the end because running at 60% for the previous couple hours wasn't good enough. So they're going to do a little bit more at the end and zoom around.
I think Priuses go at 60% all day, don't they? So
same thing, right?
Yeah. So
a Ferrari or a Prius.
Yep. So
all right, we'll get started since we're on a crunch. Before welcome, Cal. Thanks for coming tonight. I know you have a busy schedule. You're in the middle of your season, and we only know what happens when COVID jumps in to throw loops and all that. But someone's starting off the questions right off the bat. And before we get to the questions that I had to kind of walk us through this, I'll get this out of the way. A few other presentations have addressed squat depth. What squat depth do you use in training? If you use a variety of depth throughout the training, when do you adjust?
Okay. So when I squat, let's say my basic beginning phase GPP, I will, if we do a squat type movement, and that could be a step up. I like step ups because it forces the athletes into a certain depth that you choose. So that squat is deep. So these are mainly circuits, and we go deep because we're trying to build work capacity, and it's harder to go deep. And then let's say I get into triphasic. The triphasic squat depth will be deeper and not sport specific. And the reason for that is because when you're doing the eccentric phase of triphasic, you're trying to remodel tissue and tear it apart. So the deeper you go, the more effective that is for training purposes. And that's during the eccentric. And then usually I get about 4 squat workouts or 4 type of squat workouts for legs in a 2-week window during that time frame. So I go deeper in that phase. Then the ISO phase, I will recommend that they get more specific towards their, let's say you're in the acceleration phase of running, and when that foot strikes the ground, that's probably the depth I would recommend to get at. Okay. Now, if I feel that the athlete's probably, there's some variables there. So if the athlete's really needs to get stronger at that deep position, then I make them go deeper and hold the isometric squats. Like any of my hockey runners, anything, I don't make them go to the super depth. Throwers, I probably would, because they're going to spend most of the year in that depth. So the isometric phase, you can stay deep, you can come up a little higher. And when I say a little higher, so let's say you go down in the squat and then you come out with a stretch reflex, and you'll see people, if they can handle, if their stretch reflex is working, they can handle it in about 4 to 6 inches up. They seem to stall. That's where you would want them to hold their isometric squats. And then after that, the power phase and the speed phase, to make your cats faster, right? To make your cats faster, I would get a more specific to the angles at which, when that foot strikes the ground during acceleration. So look from a side view, when they're accelerating and that foot strikes the ground, that's the exact angle and position I try to hold in my squat depth. And that can ride for the next 3 to 6, 8 weeks. It depends on what I'm trying to do. So the only time I go deeper is in the eccentrics phase, the GPP phase, and the ISO potentially. And then everything else after that, whether it's heavy concentric, heavy power phase, or speed phase. And the speed, I mean, you can call it a squat, but it's really most of my squats, well, 50% load would be a squat, but 25% load, we're doing it so fast, we're doing a squat jump. Now, honestly, on my YouTube page, I've done a video where the deep squats for sprinters, especially in season, in me and my track coach's opinion for a number of years, agreed that they seem to slow them up for the time being. And the belief was, and we're pretty much, I think we were on the right track. And then I don't know if it's been proven, but a lot of coaches think this. The reason for the deep squat to slow them up is that there's so much strain at the bottom. When a more shallow squat that's, let's say, I hate to use 90, but it's not, it doesn't look 90, but it's at 90 degrees, but your knees are forward. Some people call half squats, the way that Chris and I would do a sport specific squat. I would say you can come down and react very quickly with almost any type of load. So instead of going deep into the pocket with a squat and making your athletes strain to come out, which in my opinion causes straining in the nervous system, if you're training. And when I say training, I mean, if you're doing a bunch of reps deep into the squat, you're causing them to strain coming out of the squat, where you might be able to get away with a couple heavy reps. And people think, well, this sprinter did a couple heavy reps and he set a world record a few days, 2 days later. I'm like, yeah, that's great. It wasn't from the squat. It was from the hormonal response. It was from the testosterone and growth hormone release from the heavy loads. So you can do those heavy loads doing a half range of motion or 3/4 range of motion, where they do not strain to come out of there. Because again, our belief was that we didn't get great results when they were deep squatting year round with our track athletes. And I would assume coach agrees with me on that. Would you, Tony?
Well, I just don't like squatting. I don't like
putting
a bar on somebody's back. No, we Chris and I talk a lot about slack and stuff. And I just, the guys that do heavy squatting for me just don't run very fast. And plus, there's such a cost. It seems like they go a couple days where they can't run fast.
100%. That's what we saw. That's exactly. And those were based on like flying 10 times for us. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it taxes the nervous system. So, but if you're stuck to squats, I mean, there is a hormonal response, but we found that if we pulled like the full squat 6 to 6 weeks out, we pretty much guaranteed everybody was going to be okay by the time. But again, like, and let's get ready for indoors. Like we'd come back from Christmas break and back squat deep for 2 weeks, and then we pull them, and then the rest of the next 6 weeks we squatted higher. So that was the depth on the back squat. So Chris, your thoughts?
So let's recap that, just because you covered a bunch of different periods there. So GPP would be way out in the season, not close to the season.
Yeah, building your fitness, like whatever circuits. Yeah.
And then once you get into triphasic, you start going through your 3 different phases to build. In each phase, and we're going to talk about this more in a second, but each phase has a purpose, and the depth of that squat coincides with whatever that purpose of whatever phase you're in triphasic.
Sure. And they're deeper in the eccentric and the iso.
That's right, because you do, well, you've already
for the
stated
purpose.
The reason why. Yeah,
for the purpose. But then after that, I get more sport specific in the power phase, which is my power phase is between 50 and 80% loading. And then my speed phase is between 50 and 25% of your max loading.
And I think that's one thing that people have, my opinion, what happens when people read triphasic is they're great for the first triphasic chapters, where you do the eccentric, the isometric, and concentric, and that ends it. They stop there.
Right.
And what they forget is to go on in the book, and you and I have had this conversation where over time, you're less and less in the weight room, and by the time the season starts, you shouldn't be in the weight room at all, because if everything comes to a head or peaks with everything that you've built in the weight room is built to get to that movement that your athlete does or has to do to play the sport.
100%. And that's just what we saw peaking over the years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, right? And that's the frustrating thing that, so many people want to lift weights, and what they assume is the weightlifting part of it, like it has to be done. Well, you can pull weightlifting 2 to 6 weeks out, and you're not going to, and people think, well, they're going to get weaker. Well, look, folks, you're not going to get weaker. You might get weaker at the squat, right? But I've checked kids on other things such as force plates and things like that. They may have got weaker to squat because you didn't squat heavy, but they did not get weaker because they still produce a lot of force for the next 6 weeks. So you have a 6-week window in most athletes that you don't have to try to focus on getting stronger. You can just focus on getting faster. That's the big thing that people kind of misconstrued. And I know Coach likes to hear that, right? Coach Haller, you want to hear that.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about triphasic, there's very likely 1/3 of the TFC population that really doesn't understand what you're talking about. Can you give like a 1-minute explanation of what triphasic's all about?
Sure. So the thing about triphasic is basically a block of training in 3 phases. I figured out that 3 meant tri. Chris actually helped me with that.
I helped him with that. We were stuck on 4 for a while too, and we couldn't figure out what that word was. So
yeah.
So that's why you cut off the 4th thing, right?
Right.
Down to 3 because it was a better word.
We even screwed up the Roman numeral. We were putting the one after the V, and it didn't make any sense. And it's let's just stick with 3. We know 3 lines.
Yeah. So basically, triphasic is there's 3 phases of all human movements that are dynamic. So when your foot strikes the ground, it goes through an eccentric motion upon landing, an isometric motion to hold the force, and then a concentric motion to apply it. And basically, I took that and broke that movement up into training blocks. So the eccentric part, so going slow down when you train, focus on a bench pressure, going slow down, and then you explode up. That's the eccentric part of triphasic. So we do that for 2 weeks. You don't have to change your program. You can do the same program. You just focus on going slow and controlled down. And then you do that for 2 weeks. And then the next 2 weeks, and you can take a break in between there. It doesn't matter. And then the next 2 weeks is isometric. So you bring the bar down nice and fast. You pause it at the bottom, and then you explode it up. And that's weeks 3 and 4 of your program. And then the next week is the concentric work, coach. You're just going up and down as fast as you can, whether it's heavyweight, lightweight, it depends on where you're at in your season. But ultimately, it's just a 2-week plan of an eccentric training block, a 2-week block of isometric focus, and then a 2-week block of just normal training. And that summarizes triphasic. And now there's a ton of things that happen across all the tissues and everything in your training. And just real quick, it's not sport specific, folks. Triphasic is not sport specific. 100,000 plus coaches use it. And I can say that because of the amount of books and everything that have gone out. But here's the deal. It sets you up to be sport specific. So if you're Coach Holler's strength coach, you're going to do triphasic before you hand them truly off to him. So then when he does his sport specific stuff, they get greater results because of what you've done with triphasic previously. Because if you do triphasic at the wrong time and he's running his flying tens, they're going to get slower. It's just going to happen.
It's not an in-season program.
Well, that's the thing. And I think, again,
it can be.
My point earlier is that if you see how it peaks, that there is stuff that you can do in season. And I think what Cal came out with over COVID, and I helped too, was the peaking manual with all the different things that, okay, you've gotten to this point of where we want to be when we compete. Now let's amp up the back end of that. So we're fast forward feeding the system for what it needs. And I think that's when we started throwing in all the rubber band exercises and the overspeed stuff and things like that, because we've already got to where we want to be. So what are we missing? What ingredient have we missed to get to this point? And that's where the peaking comes in. And part of what Cal talked about in his presentation.
And coach, but when you say it's not an in-season program, you're right if you've never done it in the off season, right? But the thing is I would say, okay, if you've done 2 cycles of triphasic with your kids in the off season, and then you're running a program in the in season, well, you can address like 2 or 3 simple sets of eccentrics once a week. Okay, so you can do it. And I did it with my college kids, but coach, you can't do what you do in the off season. No, I mean, you're going to blow people up. There's just no way, right? You're dead right. There's no way. And it's not a first time program in season, no matter what. But again, folks, like the biggest problem I see in training that there was a paradigm shift many years ago where we all thought I didn't think this, I thought it was crazy, but everyone went to rehab and said, oh, this is how you got to do exercises. You do this exercise because rehab says this is good. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that exercise is great, but there's no stress involved. So if there's no stress, then there's no adaptation that takes place, and I'm going to do a hamstring exercise that's really weak in the weight room and it doesn't cause any stress, but coach is going to run this sprinter through a drill that has the torque of 400 and 500 pounds on the hamstring on the track, and you're expecting this weak, simple hamstring drill I did with a towel or some type of light pad to work the hamstring to prevent a hamstring pull. That coach has a drill that he does and accelerations that cause 400 to 500 pounds of torque on the hamstring. This is ludicrous to think that we can get training methods from rehabilitation. It's just ludicrous.
And I think part of the problem is we base a lot of what we do on what happens in the training room, which is a completely controlled environment. And you have to understand from a trainer's standpoint, the last thing you want to have happen is Jimmy Jones came in here with a hamstring and we put him through some exercises and I made it worse. That's the fastest way to get fired as a trainer. The same thing as a strength coach. You don't want to get fired for getting kids hurt. And so we go through these very controlled environments, like a leg curl is a perfect example. I'm going to lay down. There's no way I can possibly squirm out of that thing once I put weight on, and it's got to be perfect every time. But now when I go to sprint and my foot's off a little bit, boom, you popped a hamstring.
Well, and that's the thing about triphasic is that eccentric phase tears the tissue apart. And what it does is it rebuilds that tissue back and the tissue becomes thicker and stronger so that the foot's in a bad position when they're sprinting, the tissue has enough tolerance because you've done triphasic already that it doesn't pop anything. And that's what coaches and people have found over the years, that they just did triphasic in the summer and they were more resistant towards the pulling hamstrings and doing things like that. And then the isometric phase, now that you have new tissue, the isometric phase gets that new tissue extremely strong, extremely fast. I have never seen anything make people stronger than isometrics. Okay. The only thing that's close is overloaded eccentrics, super maximal eccentrics. That's the only thing that's close. But again, you can do super maximal isometrics. So they're all on the same level. And there's no question that
what's your favorite isometric exercise?
So my favorite isometric for legs, the strongest I've ever seen, is isometric single leg deadlift. Let me look and see if I can find it. But basically, it's a iso rack pull, and I think I can be able to search it real quick on my YouTube.
In fact, if you watch Alex Natera's presentation, he kind of does the same thing, where it's an isometric where you have to light up all of your muscle fibers to try and push into something that's immovable.
So I found it, Chris. So here's the deal. I just put it in the
chat.
Zoom chat. Yeah. There's the exercise. And folks, what this does, this is awful. Coach, if you look on that, the quad's contracting at 100%. The hamstring is contracting at 100%. And you're doing a rack deadlift into pins. And I have never seen a 5-second lift make people so sore so fast. One set. And I think it's because both those muscles shouldn't be contracting together at the same time at that high velocity or that high strain. And there's so much going on because I've had interns do one leg one time and the next day they limped in because that one leg was sore, right? We're just talking for 5 or 10 seconds. So it's like, that's the one lift. And coach, there's not much actual loading because it's a single leg lift when you look at that. And but again, it is not sports specific, folks. It's something you do 4 to 6 weeks before major competition, or when you want your kids to run fast. I'll be honest with you. Did you see that lift, coach? I put it on the chat. You probably don't know how to click on that.
Can I click on it without messing things up?
Oh, if you click on the right, yeah. You see that chat bar at the bottom YouTube thing? I don't know.
I think it's important to note that the importance of eccentrics and isometrics. I know last night, JT talked about doing bear powered stuff and just picking up a bar. There's no tissue change and there's no hormonal change for stuff like that. And that's really what we try to do in the weight room, is to change tissue and have a hormonal response. That's where we're going to make the biggest changes.
Actually, you know what?
Real quick, there's a bunch of questions jumping up. The most important one, Dan Fichter wants to know if you have pants on.
Dan, no, I don't. Like, it's completely acceptable in COVID. So I do not have pants on. Chris made me put my shirt on. So
do you guys know this story about when we did a podcast, and I don't know a COVID thing with 1080? Tony, did I tell you that story?
No.
So it's a couple guys from Sweden, Peter and me and Cal and I are going to be on their COVID thing. And Cal just moved into his new house and we jump on the thing. Cal probably didn't have any clothes on. And he's sitting there. He had a shirt on. And then you could hear the Swedish guy's gasp when Cal went over to his railing on his balcony and peed off the balcony and showed with his camera the urine going down.
No.
and these guys, this was setting up this is a prerequisite for the talk. And they were being all like prim proper.
They're trying to be professional. Yeah. And Cal went and sat down like it was no big deal. And I could see their faces like this.
I was just being myself, coach,
Back to normal questions. Working with the high school population, what elements of triphasic model would you emphasize? Enjoyed your book. Thanks for your time.
The big difference with, that I do is all my lifts are triphasic and eccentric when I train them. So the whole body adapts to triphasic. I think in the high school population, I would just pick your main lifts and do those, and then everything else, at least maybe in your freshman, sophomore class. But then if you have an advanced class, I know some coaches have done this where, hey, they have to earn the right to do triphasic on every lift. So that's because you have to show up all the time. You have to get to a certain strength level, and then the coaches let them do triphasic on every lift. And when I say triphasic, the eccentric and isometric phase. But, and people, here's the other thing that bugs me a little bit is that people think that a kid goes in the weight room. Let's say Coach Holler has a kid that runs a, 11 flat, 16-year-old. Is that good, Coach?
That's good.
Yeah, good enough. And like this kid can accelerate. Let's say he weighs 180 pounds. When he's coming out of the blocks, there's 500 pounds of force on his ankle. He's accelerating that fast. And yet, like, oh, we got to take our time. We got to work him over the course of a couple, a few months to build him in. And I'm like, wait a minute. Everything he does in his sport is hundreds of pounds of force. This kid can fly. Like one example was I had actually a college coach, Chris, that was I showed him the spring ankle exercises, and he had a nationally ranked high jumper. And after 9 months of the spring ankle on level 1, he was like, you think I can go to level 2 with the loading on a high jumper, Chris? I was like, this guy comes down the track and has 800 pounds of force, or no, it was a triple jumper, maybe 1,000 pounds of force landing on his foot.
And you want to know if he can hang on to a 20-pound dumbbell.
Yeah, I was losing my mind. Like, you don't realize what's going on in the sports world. Like, and that's the thing. Like, people are so apprehensive about these young kids. And I'll be honest with you, these young kids are pliable. I trained my son 3 times a day, 6 days a week over COVID, and got some crazy good results, Bulgarian style. So we'd train for 30, 40 minutes at a time, and that was it. And then we do that 3 times because we had nothing else to do. Because let's be honest, this schooling wasn't really great at the time. They weren't set up for online too well. So, but that's what we did. So, I think kids are resilient, man. These kids can practice 3 sports. 3 sports athletes can go and still train. Hey, as long as the kids get sleep, I think they can train their ass off, my opinion.
So speaking of 3 sports, from Brad Dixon, let's say 3 sport high school athletes, let's say football right into basketball, right into track. Triphasic is great for the summer, but what advice would you give to programming during the school year? So in-season program for multi-sport athletes.
Yeah, well, the big thing I think then is, let's say you have if your practices aren't too crazy, you can throw the eccentric phase in. And folks, you don't have to do it. Like if you've done it in the summer, then let's say you have a football game where you're going, okay, we're going to kill these guys most likely regardless. And you don't want to take it for granted, but there's just times, well, let's throw an eccentric in this week on Monday. They can be a little sore. They should be flushed out by Friday, but they might be a little sore, but that's okay. And you can throw it in on the games that you think you can win. Because there's weeks right now that I know there's games we know that we can win. I'll train them harder, do eccentrics or isometrics. And then there's weeks, but it doesn't have to be in order. So you may do an eccentric week 3, and then week 5 of the season, you may do one more eccentric week. Week 8, you might do an iso phase. So it doesn't have to be backed up. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be like back to back, like I speak about it in the book. It can be split up. It's and that's the art of coaching, is that, hey, I'm going to make some decisions to get my athletes ready. How do you know if you made the right decision? You don't until you look at the results. I'll be honest with you.
And Brad, right? one way to think of it is this: you have to look at what are the requirements. Let's say you have athlete X and he has X amount of qualities, and each sport is going to drain some of those qualities because you're getting broke down, and it's 3 sports is a long stretch. You need to use the weight room to supplant whatever is getting taken out. So what can you give him in the weight room that he isn't getting so he can stay at athlete X? So for football, there's a ton of pushing, right? You're pushing all the time. You're pressing into someone, you're pushing off the ground. You can get rid of concentrics right there because you're doing plenty of that in football, especially the linemen. That's gone. Eccentrics, you're going to get some of it because you're sprinting. What I have found is in football, in season, people lose isometric strength. And like Cal said, that's the basis of where all of your strength comes from because that's where you're going to push from. So for something like that, well, then we need to be doing isometric stuff in our in-season workouts. It's not a general, let's just go in the weight room and lift. It's got to be figure out what are you going to do to keep that athlete at X, quality X. And you can go through with all the different things. You know, again, I'm being a purist here, but when you get to track, regardless of your event, track kind of is a balanced sport. And so really, you can get away with not being in the weight room during the track season. In fact, when people ask me, what do you do in the weight room in the season? I said, I don't, indoor and outdoor, we are not in the weight room unless I'm forced. And then I'll find something else to do. How do you get away with that? I said, well, when you sprint, you're using everything perfectly. It's a balanced exercise. It's a balanced event. Triple jump, it's all balanced. That's why the original name of track and field is athletics. It's balanced. Basketball is different. There's a ton of isometric from all the stopping and starting and a ton of eccentric. So maybe basketball would be a good time you're going to push because you don't get a lot of that in basketball. Because again, you're trying to build in for that whole year to keep athlete X at X quality. Sorry, it's not supposed to be my podcast, so I'll shut up now. Next question, Cal, and I have a whole bunch for you waiting here. With all the great knowledge being administered through TFC and each of your extensive research and books, do you have any tips for a young strength and conditioning coach like myself, his name's Ryan, to avoid paralysis by analysis when trying to solidify my coaching style or coaching lineage, choosing coaching mentors and methodology inspirations with the massive wealth of information available today?
Yeah, the first one, I wouldn't choose Dan Fichter. Only because he's crazy. So he's a great coach. No, I'm teasing. I would, the hard part is, like all these methods that people come up with, they've never tested them. That's the hard part for me. Like, let's be honest, man. When you look at when all these core training books come out, there was a ton of research when all these sports hernias and all these osteitis pubis started appearing in sports. It was right after those came out. Nobody wants to make the claim that all these core training books cause those problems, but the data out there, if you look at it, shows. Did anybody test the core training and see if it really made a difference? Well, I did. Chris knows I test everything. So I had my guys brace their core while they ran a 20. Coach, do you know what happened? Coach Holler, you know how slow they got? They lost 3/10 on a 20-yard dash when they braced their core. I'm like, how the hell could this be possible? Is this good for you? Like, coach, if a kid lost 3/10 during a season in a 20-yard dash, you would be like, son, you got cancer. There's something wrong with you, right? Like, you would say, you got to go get checked out by a doctor.
They call that kid the manager.
But no, I'm saying he got coached by you. So let's say he literally ran a 2.7, and over the course of the season, he ran a 3 flat. You would be like, I'm the worst coach ever, right? But this happened in one day. I had pitchers brace their core when they threw a baseball, and they lost like 7-8 miles an hour. So I'm like, why are we doing this in the weight room? And then ultimately a few years ago, I did a test on bench press, and the biggest thing was out of basically around 100 bench presses in tests, everyone, when they brace their core, moved the bar 100% slower than if they brace their glutes when they bench press. So Like, and then I tell that to a person who's believes in core training. And I'm like, they don't know what to say. I'm like, so you think core training is important, but have you ever tested your methods? And they guarantee they said no. So I'm biased towards myself, I think then. So I would say, read my stuff and then email me and put free beer on the title. I'll probably get back to you within a couple times. You know what I mean? If you email me once and then email me, because it's kind of like one of those Bart Simpson things. I open up my email, there's 100, and I read one with free beer, I go right to that one. So or free whiskey too, or protein shake or whatever this is. Yeah.
Flavored protein.
But right, but bracing the core, like the core, as Dan and Chris have had a number of lectures on it, the core is so reflexive. Like it's like I believe the greatest core exercise ever invented was sprinting. I think Coach would agree. How can a kid travel down the track at 11 meters per second and a 60-pound leg slam backwards at like 5 meters to 7 meters per second? So his center of gravity is going this way, his leg's going backwards to strike the ground. And when that leg snaps back, there's a few 100 pounds of force at 100th of a second. What core exercise in the weight room do we mimic that?
And then Kyle, juxtapose that with a plank. How much different is sprinting and planks?
Oh, but wait a minute, on planks, they lift their leg up like this.
Oh, Chris, I missed that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Hey, wait a minute. I picked my nose like this too. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? I don't get it.
People that I talk to, they're sprint coaches that, many of them have told me that hip flexor problems just went away when they stopped doing planks.
Amazing how that works, isn't it?
Amazing, isn't it? Here they thought they were somehow getting faster by doing planks. And yeah.
But if you think of it from a logistical standpoint as a high school coach and you have to keep your kids there for 2 hours, right? Dynamic warm-up, 30 minutes. You go through your workout. What are you doing now? We're going to do core and then we're going to cool down. You just bought another 40 minutes. So really you only got to coach for a little while because you don't know enough shit to actually coach. So you dynamic warm up, cool down, stretch, and core. There's an hour and 10 minutes of your 2 hours.
This question from Ryan is really an interesting one. I was really lucky as a track coach to coach on island. I had 4 little kids and I didn't go to clinics, and basically I learned by trial and error. I did a lot of dumb things, but I stumbled onto smart things. And luckily I developed my own ideas before I really became well-read and started.
Can I ask a question?
Smart guys. Yep.
Coach, what was your trial and error? Was it results?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's testing, right? It comes back to my point. Like, you got to test stuff to figure it out. Coach, you do a ton of it. Chris knows with the 1080s, like every rep sometimes, right, Chris?
Yeah. Every step. I know every step of every rep.
Every step. I've run 15,000 heart rate variability tests. Coach, you don't even know what that is, right? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Just know I ran that many, and what results have came, right? We're doing people ask me, well, how do you come up with some of these recovery methods? Well, I ran heart rate variability tests after I used binaural tones, after I used the mammalian dive reflex to see what changes in the heartbeat, and it's a positive change. Like here's the deal, Hank Krasnov, world-class sprint coach. Chris would agree. I mean, he won more medals than any other coach in the world in sprinting, I think.
And all-around good guy too.
Great person, right?
Yeah. You can easily sit and talk to him for 6 hours.
I've flown Hank to my house from Holland, and we sat and talk for 5 days, right? And as soon as COVID's over, I'm flying him over again. Here's the deal. Every workout is a biological experiment. That's what you did in your coaching island, Coach.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
There was.
You know what I mean? And here's the deal. I test everything. Like we have this new recovery manual coming out. All these methods, like we've tested them. It's just, we know they work because we tested it. It's pretty simple. You just got to test things and buy. I would say the biggest investment as a coach is buy investing equipment, or instead of buying, I wouldn't say not buy books, but I would buy some testing equipment, whether it's a stopwatch. How much is a stopwatch nowadays? Is it $5, 10, right? That's your first test. You know, and then you can get into, I have a $40,000 timing system that I test stuff with. I'm a little more advanced than a stopwatch now. Right. But like, you don't have to have that. You can do video analysis. Yeah.
Video has a timer on it. It's pretty accurate.
Right. But also, Chris, I mean, just doing a video, like if you guys watch my video that I lectured on, I talked about the performance pattern cycling. I would have never caught that. And I videoed my son after dynamic warm up. He ran. We squatted 4 sets, and then I videoed him. And what happened was a change in running form that was quad dominance. And I went, what the hell? I didn't know what was going on. But again, this is just, videoing is basically a form of measuring things. It takes an eye to measure it, but I saw it. And that performance cycling, I've changed my entire program because of it on that talk. So yeah, it's crazy.
By the way, Kyle, I did have mammalian dive response on my Cal Dietz bingo card tonight. That's still one of the stranger things.
Did you use it?
What's that?
Have you used it?
I didn't know if you were telling the truth or not.
No, yeah.
YouTube videos up.
Yeah, I'll put a paste. Let me paste the link to it. But yeah, so the mammalian dive response, folks, is basically a method I use for recovery. And what it is you basically are mimicking yourself drowning. Okay. So how do you mimic yourself drowning? You'd be deep in the water would be cold. You'd have warm saliva in your mouth. And then the pressure of the water is compressing your body. So when you're starting to drown, your spleen will release extra oxygen into your body because it stores oxygen to help you survive a little longer, and it will actually calm you down. So to mimic that, what I was able to do, and I caught it on my heart rate variability test, and I just put the link on there, is you put your legs up against the wall to have the blood flow and more pressure into your midsection. You put warm water in your mouth, and then you put ice bags on your face, and you lay there and you hold your breath for as long as you possibly can until you have to basically spit the water out or breathe. And the spleen, in most cases, will release extra oxygen. And it causes a shift into the recovery phase. And this is in our recovery manual that Dan Fichter and I have put together. And the whole deal is that and you got to be careful with this the first time, because if you're a wired kid that's always sympathetic, I've had kids do that and they were lethargic for almost 48 hours afterwards. Right? Most kids aren't, but if you've done it, if it's not your first time, that usually won't happen. So like when I really save it at the end of the season, coach, is when my hockey team's like, we're going to the Final Four, and on a Thursday night, we'll play the semifinals and we win. We use that method Thursday night because Friday we're off, and then we play the national championship on Saturday. So it helps them get to sleep that night. I wouldn't do it if we played Friday, Saturday. I wouldn't do it on Friday night, because unless you do it once a month, because it can make a huge shift in your recovery and you will be lethargic the next night. Now you can take a bunch of caffeine and get out of that, but still it's pretty crazy response.
But it's definitely post game.
Yeah, you'd never do that right before the game. Never.
Or at halftime.
What?
You wouldn't do it at halftime, would you?
No, God, no.
Hey, Cal, yeah. So most of us here are track coaches, and we have kids that have multiple events through a track meet. You coach hockey, and what are there, 4 quarters in hockey? Five periods?
There's three periods. Three
periods. You got some rest time in between there. What are some recovery tips that you use with your athletes, whether it's the Olympic team or the U, in between those time periods?
The biggest one, it's easiest to administer, is the nasal breathing. Make sure and they've all RPR before that. The biggest two is just make sure you're getting enough energy. Here's the one thing about energy I'll say. Like people say, well, I eat this normal and I feel good when I go to practice and everything. But what I caught on the Omega Wave was another system I bought. It's a $20,000 team system I bought years ago. The biggest thing I would say is, let's say you got a big track meet, the conference meet. What people don't realize is that let's say it's on a Saturday. I've actually caught athletes on Thursday for Saturday competition starting to burn more calories because they're mentally getting ready. So their metabolic system kicks in and starts burning more calories. And they go, well, I'm just going to eat normal. No. You have to add in more calories because if you're mentally getting ready, you're drawing on that. The big thing is, some nitrous oxide. I do like the beet juice stuff, Chris, in between. I think that's an excellent, and then just light movement to get ready to go again. And
which beet juice? There's a lot of different products out there.
Yeah. The one I like, Coach, is actually, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's Neo 40. So it's tablets. It's a tablet you can see, in your mouth. It's a really good.
The actual beet juice doesn't taste good.
To some people, yeah. And there's a couple. I think the biggest ones. I'm not sure. I think you could probably find an article on that. You know what I'm saying?
What was the name of the tablets again?
Neo 40. It's NEO 40.
Got it.
That's a really good one, Coach. Actually, Coach, you should take it. I think after 35, you start to reduce those levels of nitrous oxide. And I'll be honest with you, that actually is a big vascular system. Like, it opens up the vascular system. And I'll be honest with you, that's one thing the isometrics do is they cause the vascular system to expand and be more pliable. Okay. And athletes need it. Right around competition, it'll help with the recovery, and with the vascular system being more pliable, you're basically just able to get more nutrients into the muscle to repair and to re-energize the muscle in between periods, Chris. That's the big thing too.
What would be the timing of the Neo 40?
What would be the timing? Oh, it works instantly.
So, I mean, is that something that you could do like during a track meet?
Good. Yeah, I definitely would take, especially, Coach, the 400-meter guys. Make sure you take it 20 minutes before that.
Cool.
Right? Yeah, because so I am shocked that this hasn't, and it lowers the blood pressure, the Neo 40, because the vascular system becomes more pliable. And I'm going to be honest with you, all my testing devices, I came to the conclusion that sometimes, and I have a device that's called a Moxie that analyzes the muscle, the amount of blood going into it. And here's what we found. I've had kids with extremely strong hearts, great lung systems, but their legs would get tired. Well, when we put them under some stress, what we found was they had a vascular occlusion. So the arteries run into the muscle, gets the muscle everything it needs, but the veins that send it from the muscle back to the lungs, it was tight. So with that vascular occlusion, it created a backup. So the reason their muscles got tired was because it got the nutrients in, but it was a backup and it couldn't push the stuff out. So guess what fixes that? Isometric phase of triphasing. The isometric phase will make the blood vessels more pliable. So when I say that, if there's any doctors on here, you can look up, or anybody can look up pulse wave velocity. So what we found was when we do let me give you this example. You see those old people on the commercials like Coach here, but they got high blood pressure, right? And they use those devices. They say, if you got high blood pressure, squeeze this in your hand and it'll help with your blood pressure. Why? Because it causes your blood pressure to go up. It makes your vascular system more pliable. So then the more pliable the hose in your veins is, the less blood pressure you have. So my point to you is, you think that device works, you should throw 500 pounds on your back on a single leg safety bar squat and go into a squat and hold your breath. Watch what happens. Your blood pressure drops. I have had athletes that went to a 32 resting heart rate with a blood pressure of right around, I think the one kid was 80 or 60 over 80. And low blood pressure is okay as long as you don't pass out. And that actually readjusted because of the baroreflex. But those isometrics in the triphasic. So my point is that sometimes you have a blood flow problem into the muscle, even though everything else is good, and your legs will fatigue. You have a blood flow problem going out of the muscle, your legs will fatigue. The isometric phase fixes that. It's crazy. And I was shocked how many of my athletes, well, they weren't mine because mine had been through triphasic, didn't have that problem. But any athlete that I would test coming in, they had a problem. We put them through triphasic, and lo and behold, that fixed that problem. So there's things going on in triphasic that I haven't even wrote about. When you read triphasic, it was just a fraction of what's really going on. So
I'm going to change gears here on you, Cal.
I didn't do it.
Oh, wait, I've got to scroll down. You say high school kids are durable. We have a female jumpers who go from track practice to club volleyball. Is that too much?
That's a lot with the contact. Yes, for sure it is. Now, the one thing I would say is make sure. So what's taking all the blunt? The foot. You got to do the spring ankle exercises that Chris invented, right? Those are game changers because look, the foot's a spring. Am I misspeaking there, Chris?
No, it is.
No, the foot's a spring. Those spring ankles that Chris invented will help you absorb that force. So you should be able to handle that. But if they have a bad foot, they will not handle that, and something will break. Usually, what first happens? Probably some knee pain in females, at least. You know what I mean? Because if the foot's bad, then the lateral slings off, and that lateral sling off, then they're not activating the muscles of the hip. So then they probably go valgus a lot, but ultimately it's that spring ankle exercises that are key. You can find those on the YouTube page.
You know,
I think actually I'll link them.
A good answer to that would be the more efficient the athlete is, the more they can do. So if you have a female jumper who's going from track practice to club volleyball practice, if their body can handle force appropriately and efficiently, it's not a lot of strain on the body. The body's built to take that. But once you dump and you're not a good spring anymore, and you have muscles that are picking up for what the tendon and ligament system is not, that's when you start to have problems. You're going to get the fatigue that bleeds into a 4 or 5 hour practice, because let's say girl A is built perfectly. You know, it's easy for her feet and knees to absorb all that force from all that jumping and all that movement because you're relying on the ligaments and tendons to do everything. But athlete B, she's not efficient. She dumps a lot into her hips. She's knock-kneed, her knees bend in, her foot's turned out. She has to dump a lot into her muscles so her muscles can pick up what the tendons and ligaments aren't. And so at the end of the day, athlete B has expended probably 10 times more energy than athlete A. So if you have, it's going to depend on the athlete. And I think when Cal said you can train kids all day, I think it's important to note that Cal was talking about younger kids, prepubescent and so on, where they don't have the mass that pubescent or post-pubescent athletes have. And they don't have, their bodies just work a lot better. It's a lot more pliable. The tendons and ligaments are longer so they can move in different ways and absorb more energy.
And I would put in too, I've coached a lot of kids in track that were playing another sport. And like my rule with jumpers anyway is less is more. Most jumpers jump way too much. So if you had a girl going to volleyball, just consider that her jump practice as often as possible, so that you're not, the last thing you want to do is, well, the other kids are all running 8 200s a day. So she's going to have to do that too. You cannot treat every kid the same.
That's the art of coaching right there, coach. You're you're dead right with that. Look, there's no absolutes in this. And like Chris, the thing about young kids, they're so resilient, is that their oxygenation system is so good. The oxidative, and I know coach doesn't like the oxidative stuff, but like coach, I tell a story about my son when he was 7. I was running Omega Wave tests on him, and he went to his mom's.
Let's rephrase that. You waited for him to go to sleep, and then you ran Omega Wave tests on him after he was asleep because he had no idea what was going on.
No, that's not what. He fell asleep during the test. He was so tired on that one. No, I'm not denying I haven't done that, right? But like, I'm not denying I haven't done that to my kids. But so he went to a hockey camp. It was really hard. He snuck on the ice for the second hockey camp he wasn't supposed to. He went when he went home from his mom's hockey camp after 2 sessions. He went to the neighbor's pool without eating lunch, swam for like 6 hours. We called him home to eat dinner. He ran home. I wanted to Omega Wave him, and he fell asleep, and he didn't eat dinner. This Omega Wave tells me how shot they are. He was so tired that I'm telling you, if it was an Olympic athlete, it would have taken him a week to recover, right, in that state. And here's the crazy thing. When the next morning I Omega Waved him again when he woke up, he hadn't ate dinner. I don't think he ate lunch, maybe some snacks. Guess what happened? He was 100% ready to go. And there's 2 things here. One, he was ready to go because kids' aerobic systems are so good. They're built for survival, right? The species, like women and kids, I found are built for survival. So women and kids will make it through a famine before the males will.
What are men built for?
War and fighting. Okay. So with that being said, and look, women make all the people, right? Like women make the people. So we don't need the male. We need one male to make it, but we need more women to make it. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's crazy. But, and then the other thing is that he doesn't have any stress in his life, right? Hank told me this when I asked him about it. He was like, Cal, look at buses on my campus go by with adults all the time on it. They all look like they're going to the fucking morgue. I'll be honest with you, to identify a body. They're all stressed. And then a busload of 8-year-olds go by. What do you see? Kids jumping around, having a good time. Like they don't have all the outside pressures. So in my opinion, if a kid's stress-free, they can handle tons and tons of stress.
And I think
physical stress.
And I think that can go for adults too.
If I didn't drink and have all the bills or had to talk to Dan Fichter, right? Like I would be so much stress free. I mean, coach can vouch for me there. Can't you holler?
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that guy. He's a bad habit for me. I just call him anyway, even though I don't want to talk to him. I call him anyway. So, but yeah, anyway, so that's the thing about the kids, and I think we can do a lot with them, and I push my kids. Like you're delusional. Kids can't do jumps. People say, well, you shouldn't do to double body weight squat. Look, I was 150 pound. I was probably 150 pound third grader, right? I was a little heavy, a little on the chunky side, right? And I would jump off the back of a couch. So you're talking about 600 pounds of force landing on the ground. But I can't go into a gym and do a good plyometric? You're crazy. You know what I mean? You're crazy.
Yeah, kids can sprint every day.
Every day.
Every day. But if I have like an all-state sprinter, he can't sprint every day, or he shouldn't. So things are different. They have higher outputs.
Well, yeah. I think there's 2 reasons maybe. I think the biggest one you said, higher outputs. Like, Charlie Francis talked about high-low method. I think that's fine, but I'm telling you, I don't know many kids that have those type of nervous systems. No. Because I agree, if a world-class sprinter runs hard, his nervous system is going to take a few days to recover. So do horses, right? So do horses. But I got an average college athlete. I run them 5 days a week. Short sprints, 6 reps a day. That's it. And I'm done before my workout, right? Young kids, I went one summer with my son. I ran him every day of the year, every day of the summer for 4 months. You know what happened? He got faster, coach. And everyone else would say I'm overtraining him, right? Yeah, whatever. So
another question further question on triphasic. With COVID, we have limited opportunity for high school athletics for the winter season. If implementing triphasic, do you cycle 2-week cycles of eccentric, iso, and concentric, or do you perform one cycle and move into another modality?
You can do either or, whatever you think's best. I would just get them both in at some point. You don't have to go eccentric right into isos. Look, but people ask me, well, can you do isos first? You can, but I haven't got the best results. I tried it every way possible, you know. And look, you think triphasic was just Cal Dietz' idea? It was thousands of athletes getting experimented on for 2 decades. That's what it was. Triphasic is probably 20 assistants, 100 interns, and 1,000 athletes getting experimented on. And I found out that to be the best. Now, physical therapists that use triphasic have found they need to do an isometric phase right out of surgery. Then they do the eccentric, and then they do isometric, and they get great results that way. But yeah, you don't have to put them back to back.
And I think implementing with high school athletes, what you have to be careful with is to not go light on the eccentrics. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people come in and, you know, they've got some weight on the bar and they're going down slowly. And it's like, well, how much do they lift normally? And so, it's just about that, maybe a little bit more. It has to be the eccentrics if you're going to truly do them. And Hank and I had a long conversation about this, is you have to not be able to come out of the lowering of that weight. It's not like a Lifetime Fitness eccentric that you see Pops doing, where they're doing a curl and they're going down for 10 seconds and they bring it back up. When you go down with that, you're landing that weight and there's no way you can come out of that. That's a true eccentric. And I see people put that on and they pop right up. And I'm not saying you start with that right away. You've got to build to that. But when you get to the peak of that eccentric, that's where you have to go. And I think, you know, everyone's into flywheels and things like that, and they're great. I've got a couple, I use them. But again, the limitation on flywheels is that you come out of that. It may generate more force than what you pushed into it, but if you can bounce out of it, it's not a great exercise. And Hank, when you get Hank pissed, you know, with all the people with all their fad stuff, he did this stuff with Carmelo Bosco back in the 80s. And they've got all the data to back it up. In fact, Brian Mann just had a shout out to Carmelo Bosco on a Facebook post and said, remember this dude, Carmelo Bosco? That guy was brilliant. And yet we kind of moved on from him.
Chris, I definitely want to get this question in because time's running short. Chris Meng is a friend of ours, and he's training an Olympic hopeful, an 800 meter in the 800 meters for girls. And he has trained her with a foundation of speed. So his question, and this is important to them, obviously, what are the best ways to develop aerobic capacity for speed-based mid-distance runners without, and this is the key thing, without compromising speed or mechanics? And he says, outside the box answers only.
So when I would do it would be later in the week once you've been, so let's say you're training on a Saturday. I would do all my work capacity stuff on a Saturday. I would consider in the weight room Thursday, Friday, Saturday to do more upper body volume, maybe a circuit that is done while holding the breath. I have a GPP manual that you could look at, take methods from, but use your upper body to get your heart in shape without screwing up all the skill development from the lower body and all the power development. Like the one big thing that I've talked about over the years is that, like in my throwers, I knew I had to build more work capacity so they could train harder. But how did I do that? So I just did a EDT cycle. It's in my GPP manual. I'll post it here. But they did a weightlifting circuit that kept their heart rate at 160 beats per minute for 40 minutes, doing a weightlifting circuit. So they didn't go out and jog and lose all this muscle and become weak. So I would do it later in the week after you've done all your speed development stuff. And that's a big, big deal, in my opinion, in regards to that's when you would do it. Now, other methods, maybe, I don't know, maybe you tell them to swim a little bit, maybe biking. I like biking only because it's a non-impactful and it's not going to screw up a lot of things with the impact of it.
Rowing as well. Rowing, there's no impact when you row. And that's, if you want to see freak aerobic athletes, I think the best in the world are rowers.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty tough, honestly. I think rowing, those other alternatives, but again, don't do them in the middle of the week. I truly believe you do all high quality work, coach, Monday through Thursday, however you want to plan it. But then maybe Thursday after practice or Friday and Saturday, you can do high volume work. That goes back to the triphasic shifted undulated model from the Bulgarians that I came up with. On Friday, Saturday, do high work capacity stuff. And that undulated model is that you just do all your work capacity at the end of the week, minus, and really, folks, why I did that. This is, people think I'm so scientific, but the Bulgarians did all work capacity at the beginning of the week, and they used some drugs, probably 13 or 20 at the same time. But here's the deal: my athletes would be beat up, and then there was I remember when I created Triphasic, there was a 10-cent wing night and like $3 pitchers. So I was just pissed that the kids would come in Friday and Saturday and be screwed up, and hung over. So I just put the high volume day then, right, to make them pay for everything they did, the high volume day in the weight room and conditioning. And lo and behold, we got better results, right? So really it wasn't scientific. It was that one of the bars had a wing and beer night on Thursday night. So then I just, Friday and Saturdays, I did the high volume days. So that's all the scientific stuff that I did. So.
Would you recommend your aerobic running drill circuit as a way for athletes to do that as well?
I do think, Chris, you like that still, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent, that's by far an excellent source of just building work capacity. And what did we call that?
I forgot.
I'll look it up. I'll try to paste it here in a second. But yeah,
I think it's important to note that we have to understand the environment that our kids are in right now. And all these states are talking about rushing back to sports, and we're going to start this up here and we're going to start this up there. I think it's really important that you build into your preseason, however that works, some form of aerobic block for a couple of weeks, because kids have not done anything.
Yeah, kids are so bad. I just pasted that aerobic block thing for the running on there. So, and the GPP manual for people to look at. It's look, the GPP, when I say that, it's general fitness. The higher your work capacity, the more repeated sprints you can do with coach. So if you're out of shape, you might be only do 4 to 6 good sprints. But if you're in shape and you can handle them, you might be able to push 8, 10 even. And that, to me, that's why I did that, was found the GPP, the general fitness, to be able to do 1 or 2 more reps, just to say I'm a little bit better than you and get better results, in my opinion. So, and I got a little time, guys, until I get a text that I have to leave, but we can keep going with a little bit more. So,
all right, here's a question for you, Cal. We know that you lost all of your assistants, all of your aides, everyone that's helped you, the army of people that work for you. So you're by your own in that enormous room. What are your go-tos right now? Because I know you can't monitor everyone, and I know how pissed you are that you can't monitor everyone. What are your basics? What have you gone to?
So in my, honestly, split squat, pitch shark, French contrast, glute ham hyper, reverse hyper. I pair that with the flying primetime Dion's that I got from you, Chris. And in part, I think it's part 4 of the talk that we did here. They're the functional complex, the functional transfer complexes. It's by far the most fluid transfer of athletic movement I've ever seen. So basically, if you haven't looked at the lecture yet, you do a glute ham and then you do a bent knee prime time right after the glute ham in the weight room. And I've never, ever seen athletes become more fluid and change from a quad dominant type athlete to a more fluid athlete in 1 to 2 weeks.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. The glute ham and reverse hyper together if I had a quad dominant athlete, I knew they would transfer in about 6 to 8 weeks. But if you pair that with a Dion primetime run, I have never seen anything transfer fluidity and athleticism. Because here's the deal, folks. The reason Tony Holler doesn't like the weight room as much, he's dead right. There's nothing in the weight room that simulates what we do on the track or in the field. It's too slow. But you do a glute ham, which is too slow for what we do on the field, and then pair that with a primetime Dion run, I'm just going to tell you, it is a game changer in regards to the results that I got. And I will put that will be in triphasic too.
And it's also in at the end of your presentation.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been doing that now for a couple of weeks or more than a couple of weeks. We've been doing it for a while. And I'll tell you what, athletes ask to do that workout again because they say, not only did I feel awesome at the end of the workout, 3 days later, I felt great. Yeah. And that's what I want. I want my kids to feel great all the time. And they say, I feel different when I walk. I feel different when I'm moving. When I'm going upstairs, I can feel it work.
And what I'm talking about is, and this is all Chris's videos. I'll post it here. But it's just that Deion Sanders run paired with basically paired with the glute hams or reverse hyper. And I talk about it in the clinic. But the reason I think it transfers so well is, I'll be honest with you, is the gait that when you do gait, walking, crawling, paired with an exercise, it helps transfer it over. And your body loves to walk, your body loves to move. And that's the gait cycle is premium when it comes to this. Would you agree with me, Chris, on that transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you got to play with that. If you're not the strength coach in the school, he needs to understand that this will be a game changer. Those two things, the performance cycling that I talked about and the functional transfer complex. If you have a strength coach that's just narrow-minded, just tell him to add those few things in there and you're going to get some game changers. Because I know Coach Holler, like, I'd hate to have been your strength coach 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So I would have hated to have been your strength coach. Well, you didn't have one, did you?
I was the strength coach.
Yeah. But the strength coach in the gym was probably going, this bastard, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? But now I think we could figure it out. You'd probably make me a better strength coach just working with you. I'd make you probably a worse coach working with you. So we'll just go from there.
We'd have fun though.
Oh man, we'd have fun. We'd experiment for sure.
We would.
So, yeah.
Cal, what are some other FTC movements that you're doing besides glute ham prime times?
I will do a side lateral shuffle, and it looks pretty. So I'll do an abduction exercise with whether they put them laying on their side on a bench, and I push down on their hips.
So their body is literally, their hip is at the end of a table, and their torso is hanging off, and they're pushing in through their foot.
Well, they're bridging on their elbow, and their knees are up on the bench, and I'm pushing down sideways. Right. And then and when I say that, like, I'll give you the exercise here. I'm bringing them up, but and then what we do is we do a side lateral straight leg shuffle, and like I haven't released that. I was saving that for Triphasic, the book, but Triphasic 2. But so you do that abduction exercise where you're pushing on their hip, and I just put the post up there for that, and then they do a side lateral straight leg shuffle. And it just looks so athletic. The kids' hips are opening up better. I was getting a lot of props on the Big Ten Network was it Monday or it was Tuesday night, because we were playing Michigan and we're ranked third in the nation or fourth, and they were talking about our speed compared to everybody else. And honestly, coaches, I'm telling you, it's the prime times paired with the glute ham and everything, and then this thing too. That lateral movement, if you think about it, change of directions and lateral stability. Chris, I think I got to throw the GOAT exercise. Did I talk about that in the presentation or not?
You did. Yeah.
Yeah. That goat exercise for lateral stability is crazy good. I'm telling you, Chris, and Coach Holler, when you do see that drill, that's just for general athleticism. I'm getting a bunch of emails from people that said it's making their kids dizzy and sick. Sounds horrible, but it's actually a good thing because it's developing things in their brain. Maybe Dan Fichter could give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on that. But that goat drill is the real deal in regards to development of skill and just overall general ability to increase your skill development.
Cal and I have been working with an NBA team, and they sent videos. They bought into the goat drill big time, and they sent videos to show the changes in their athletes just by implementing the goat drill.
What you're doing is you're raising the ceiling of all the skills involved to being an athlete. Not all of them, it's not possible, but it's a pretty crazy good drill. When you guys before we leave, I want to make sure everybody got a chance to copy all those links that I posted up there for them. So maybe stay on for everybody. But what else we got? I'm still good.
You're still good?
I'm still good.
So you and I have talked a lot about middle school training. I think that's a huge hole in the training world, that you have parents, coaches who have middle school kids, prepubescent, dads that want to work out with their kids, that kind of stuff. And you and I have talked about that quite a bit. Why don't you share some of the stuff that we've talked about and what you think is really good, why for that age group?
Well, spring ankle's key. The spring ankle, Chris, I had a friend of mine, I implemented that with their daughter who was a little bit uncoordinated with soccer, and she became lights out. Like it completely changed her. They didn't know what happened in 4 weeks. And the reason for that is because every time her foot struck the ground, her arch collapsed. Her brain went crazy, said, I can't find stability, so I'm going to reduce her ability to run. So folks, when your foot strikes the ground and if your arch collapses, your body will reduce the distance of that stride. So those spring ankles are key for that. So they said she ran faster, more fluid. Of course she did, because now she's not running on a pad. So take your Coach Holler, take your world-class sprinters at the high school level. They're world-class for sure. And put them on a soft pad and make them run. Watch what happens to their form. It falls to shit. Right. That's what's happening when your spring ankle's terrible. Or that whole foot complex. And then the hip series that I posted on here, that hip series is a game changer. And then just the hip extension exercises of adding the toe, squeezing the toe that I talk about in original triphasic, not in great detail. Adding the toe when they go to come up is big to drive home that hip extension pattern, because that pattern is key. And then I'll be honest with you, some form of jumping, hip extension, but you got to work the posterior chain. And Chris, I'm going to go back to this. That prime time I haven't done it yet, but I would assume that prime time paired with some strength exercises, it doesn't have to be glute hammer, reverse hyper. It can be RDLs. It can be anything. Paired with prime times will be an amazing change in high school, middle school kids. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Well, what did you think about the peaking stuff with the rubber bands?
I know that I prescribed that. I know John Wellborn played a number of years in the NFL, and he's doing that with his 5-year-old, our peaking, the peaking manual stuff. And when I say that, he's going to have that kid do that for a good till about 8 or 9 when he starts lifting heavy weights. I think I did that, versions of that with my kids when they were young. I wish I would have came up with it sooner, but we didn't. But yeah, it's a game changer in regards to, because look, they need to be more athletic, and some of those peaking exercises in that peaking manual are the most speed development stuff that I've ever seen. It's just my opinion in regards to just moving fast, because again, the reason Coach Holler hates the weight room is because it's all slow. Well, all these peaking exercises is exactly what we want. I'm going to keep peeking for the speed manual. I'm just going to paste this on right now for people. There's like 8 key exercises in there that I'm going to paste right now for people to take a look at.
This is kind of going back, but Brad Dixon wants to know, what if you don't have a glute ham machine?
Yeah, you can do any, it doesn't matter, any posterior chain. So if let's say you're going to do an RDL, I would pair that with a bent knee, because if your posterior chain, let's say you're doing a glute ham and a hamstring exercise mixed together, you're going to do a bent knee Dion primetime run. If you're going to do solely a glute exercise, let's say you're going to do a glute bar lift where the hamstring's not as involved, I'll do the straight leg Dion's. But when, like, my athletes are different. When you see the video I posted, that's one of Chris's athletes. Chris, I think he's covering at least 8 to 10 feet with each step on that prime time. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, he's humming.
He is humming. It's poetry in motion. Like,
now,
if he
was
just
assisted though, wasn't he? Was he assisted by 1080?
On some of them.
Some in there that are, some of them that aren't.
Yeah, on some of them on my page. Yeah, it's crazy. And he is smooth, right? I'm just telling you, it's impressive. And look, a bunch of my hockey kids who are terrible runners, I should have videoed how bad they were at the beginning, but 2 weeks later, they were smooth. They weren't covering the distance. And I think that's one of the coaching things, Chris, with the prime time, is that my athletes, the 2 biggest things I try to drive home after I let them go 2 weeks without coaching them, just see what happened. Then the biggest thing was, when the foot strikes the ground, focus on driving forward, right? Covering distance, and then getting that split with the other leg when they push.
Yeah, the split's really important. I think if you watched the Ken Clark stuff,
yeah,
and I talked about it quite a bit, it's part of what we're looking for. And that can be bent knee or straight knee. We're looking for that split, or at least find the ability to get to that split.
Yeah, I mean, and without even, and I can't say that the drill caused it, but I found that the split got better those first 2 weeks. And I'm not saying because of the drill. I'm just saying the kids got more comfortable with the drill. So again, what I'll do sometimes is, like with my running, I will not coach them for a period of time just to see what happens. Because if I coach them and I influence them too much, then I can't get a true indication of what's going on with the drill. So sometimes you learn more from your athletes if you don't coach them too much. Coach them to be safe, but after that, let's see what happens. Like years ago, I realized when my athletes were doing the glute ham one time, all my hamstring dominant hip extension pattern kids would try, when they did the reverse hyper, would try to bend their knees before they actually moved their hips. And it was an indicator that they were a hamstring, the glute pattern for RPR. And so it was just an indicator. But if you're coaching them to do certain things all the time, then you don't pick that up. So sometimes not coaching your athletes and just watching what transpires is good as a coach. It's crazy, but some people say that, but they don't, some people don't believe in that, but I'm like, hey, I don't coach running because running tells me a lot about what's going on with the body. Now, if my kids were world-class track kids, I would coach them in a heartbeat. But my kids are hockey players and other athletes, so we're going to figure it out.
So, Cal, there's a question here. I got to find where I put this window. Here it is. Have you paired the FTC method with your peaking methods, co-contracture, rebound, oscillatory, isometric? If so, what are the outcomes? If not, why?
Well, the biggest one is the co-contraction is the most sport specific. The rebound affects the tendons more, and the OC oscillatories, where you don't leave the band and it's constant tension, is a more metabolic work capacity at high speeds. So that's the difference. And I've proven that with, I have another $20,000 device. It's called the TMG, tensiomyograph. And it showed that the co-contractions, where you move as fast as you can, leaving the band, increase the contraction speed. The rebound method, where you slam into the band, you come up, you slam in again, affected the tension or the tendon and stiffness qualities of the muscle and the tendon. And then the OC, where you have a constant tension into the band, you never leave it, increase work capacity of the muscle. So those are the different outcomes. And it's in the peaking manual. I talk about that. Those are the various outcomes. Yeah. It's again, that's how I peak all my teams now. It's what I recommend, only because, again, all that stuff is super fast, and that's what happens in sports. Any other questions?
I think we're clear here.
Awesome.
I don't have any popping up.
All right. Dan Fichter was texting me, people, and he was very rude and unprofessional. And I'm just letting everybody know. Yeah. So if you see Dan Fichter, okay, the international man of mystery, as JL Holsworth calls him. Dan, remember the last time we met? You were in that cocktail waitress dress, and I was. Anyway, I better not talk about that. Anyway, he's texting me now. There's a big finger in the middle.
Now he's gonna be pissed.
Oh, I love Dan. So.
Well, thanks for your time tonight, Cal.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, for coming on, man.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. I just wish I could get paid and you could get rid of those pictures you have of me, and I don't have to do this for free anymore, Coach Holler. So, but every year I got to come and do this because you got pictures.
Ever and ever.
Awesome. So, well, I'm glad to be here and just lose those pictures some year. All right. Yep. So. All right, guys.
Have a good night.
Hey, you guys have a good night. Take care.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, Chris, you're not going to be on tomorrow, right?
I got school tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll take care of Brian Kula is going to be on tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.